Hey, friend, Chris Vandeviver here from WhyLogicProRules.com, the website that helps you get the most you can out of Apple's Logic Pro 10. Today in our 30-day series of Why Logic Pro Rules, I want to dig into one of the most quintessential plugins that just about all of us use in Logic, and that's Channel EQ. The Channel EQ is your classic parametric band EQ. It's clean, it's digital, and it can be as narrow or broad as you need it to be. But the Channel EQ comes with a lot of depth and a lot of capabilities. And I just want to go through a highlight reel of why I love the Channel EQ. Now, this is not a beginner's guide to how to EQ. I actually have a series on getting more out of EQ in Logic Pro 10, and I'll link it in this video right above. But I want to quickly show you how you could be getting more out of the Channel EQ. To start, we obviously all know how to open a plugin, but I'm just going to navigate over here to the audio effects. I'm going to click on an empty slot below the two plugins and go down to EQ and the Channel EQ. And as we mentioned, it's an 8-band parametric EQ that offers us a high pass, a low pass, a high shelf, low shelf, and 4 parametric bands, which you can make as broad or as narrow as you need them to be. So you can get so specific and so fine-tuned about using the Channel EQ. But before we dig any further into the Channel EQ, I want to show you a couple of ways that you can open the Channel EQ with a single click. Let's take a look at the inspector over here. And if you don't see the inspector, just click on the I button at the top here. And we can see that we have a little display of the Channel EQ. This is the EQ thumbnail, and it's giving us an immediate idea of what kind of EQing is going on this track without ever having to open the Channel EQ. For now, I'm just going to close the Channel EQ. And if you don't have this little display here, if you right-click in the inspector, go down to Channel Strip Components, we have EQ thumbnails. So just make sure to enable that. Or if we open the mixer, we can do the same thing. Right-click just about anywhere, Channel Strip Components, EQ thumbnail. Cool. From here, I'm going to click on the EQ thumbnail, which now opens a new instance of the Channel EQ. So one click, ready to go. And if we close the plugin, we can always access that first Channel EQ just by clicking on the thumbnail. Now, if I have a second Channel EQ, and if I just pull this like that, if I click on this EQ thumbnail, it always opens the first Channel EQ in the series, never the second, third, or fourth one. That's why we don't see this curve being presented right here in the thumbnail. But we can also open the linear phase EQ if we so need to by holding Shift and clicking the EQ thumbnail. So now the linear phase EQ is open and is the first EQ in the series, so that's the one that we'll see. So if you're working on multi-mic instruments where phase is a concern, very easy, quickly can open the linear phase EQ. But one last thing for you. If you have a lot of processing on a track and you later decide that, oh man, I wish I had put a Channel EQ in that first slot before everything else, while we could go to the top, look for that little thin line at the top and then dig into the plugin menu, instead we can just hold Option and introduce the Channel EQ first in line. So very helpful. And if I hold Shift, Option, click, now the linear phase EQ first in line. Let's now dig into the Channel EQ itself. And what I love about the Channel EQ is the spectrum analyzer. I mean, this thing is fantastic. It gives us a visual presentation of the signals that we're working with, and we can even scale the presentation of the spectrum analyzer as well. So I'm going to solo this track, and let's just take a look at what's going on here. Now, the spectrum analyzer is pretty low, and so we're only seeing a little bit of this signal. I wish I could see more of it, and you actually can. Now, first of all, I should have pointed out that every single plugin in Logic that comes with Logic is fully scalable, and this includes software instruments as well. If we go up to View, we can actually pick different preset views of the plugin, so that's pretty small, pretty large. Or you can hover your mouse in the bottom right-hand corner, and when you see this dual arrow, just click, hold, and drag back and forth. So we can have a plugin as little or as big as our display allows. But on top of this, we can also adjust the scale by clicking and dragging on the left-hand side here. So check it out. Now we're seeing so much more of this signal that's going on. Additionally, we can also adjust where the ruler for the frequencies from left to right sits in relation to the spectrum analyzer. So check it out. So if you prefer that the ruler doesn't sit directly in the middle, well, you can adjust it to the top or bottom. And we can also right-click anywhere in the channel EQ display since 10.5, and we can adjust how much resolution we have with this EQ. So do you want 12 decibels? Let's take a look at that. So we have 1 to 6 in both directions, adding up to 12. So if you need a lot of resolution to make very little adjustments, this might be the scale that you're looking for. Or we can adjust to linear 30. So we have 15 dB in either direction, so a little less fine. Or we can adjust it to linear 60, so 30 dB in either direction. And we can also have a warp view. So we have a little more resolution going 0 to 5, a little less 5 to 10, and a little bit more 10 to 20 as compared to 10 and 5. And what I love since the 10.5 update is in previous versions of the channel EQ, if we boost the signal at all, we see a visual presentation of that boost or cut in terms of gain for the overall signal. So if you make any sort of EQ adjustments, I find that it sort of obscures the EQ changes, and I don't really like that. So if we actually right-click and turn off visual master gain, boom. Now we don't have this presentation of gain. Just be thoughtful of how much you're cutting or boosting. We can also make a couple different adjustments using key commands in the visual display. If you click and hold one of these nodes and then hold Command, you can lock the direction in which you are adjusting the EQ. So I'm adjusting vertically right now, and if I pull it to the left or to the right, we're not moving in the left or right direction. But if I click, drag a little in a particular direction, hold Command, now we can go left to right without adjusting up or down. Additionally, if you grab the handles on the left and right hand sides, you can adjust the width. And if we hold Option and Command, we get this Q button, so now we can adjust going backwards or forwards, adjusting the Q at the same time. So you're able to adjust the width while adjusting the center frequency. While there's many things to love about the channel EQ, what I love about it is that we can actually break it out. So if you're working with a stereo signal, you can either process in full stereo, the left signal separate from the right separate from the left, or the mid separate from the side, and vice versa. For those of us who are beginners, that might feel kind of intimidating, but let me just demonstrate. So let's reset everything. Go to Recall Default, and let's listen to this track. And I'm going to change the processing to left only, and we'll make some adjustments. So I'm impacting the left completely separate from the right, or the right separate from the left, or everything down the center, that's the mid content, separate from the sides, and the sides separate from the mid. So the side stuff is everything that's been hard pan left and right. There's so much versatility with the channel EQ, and the depth of which this plugin provides us is just amazing. So I hope this video was helpful for you. If it was, as always, I highly suggest subscribing to the YouTube channel, Why Logic Pro Rules, or subscribing on the website itself, WLPR.com. Every week, I'm posting new videos, new emails, and posts to help you get the most you can out of Apple's Logic Pro 10. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next video in this series.